Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a meeting of council for the 7th of March. Item 1, apologies for absence. I have apologies from councillors Reader, Angelique and Mark Foster, Councillor Parkin, Councillor Rennick, Councillor Hartshorn, and Councillors Drabble, Dayton and Lewis. Are there any other apologies? If not, we move to item 2, declarations of interest. Members are requested to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest and or other interests not already on their register of interests in items on the agenda and withdraw from the meeting at the appropriate time. I'd like to declare that as a member of the Ricknell board, item 14, where I'll be leaving the meeting. Councillor Ruff.
I have the same declare interest in that item.
Councillor Liggett.
I won't be voting on item 7.
Thank you. Councillor Clough.
Item 14, Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Welton.
Same, thanks.
Thank you. Any other declarations? If not, item 3, minutes of the last meeting to approve as a correct record the minutes that have been circulated. Do we have a proposer, please? Thank you, Councillor Dale. And the seconder, Councillor Cupid. All those in favour? Thank you. Anyone against? Any abstentions? If not, they have been approved. Thank you. So item 4, Chairman's announcements. I'm sure colleagues will be horrified by recent events in Ukraine. There is significant emotional impact of seeing daily accounts of the war, and it is impossible not to be moved by the devastating images on our screens. It is difficult to comprehend how lives have been changed forever by bullets and bombs. To hear of the needless deaths of so many civilians, the developing refugee crisis, and appalling siege tactics that has turned us all into hostages of Putin's imperialism. We are all bystanders in Putin's war, where we are left observing human suffering on our own European doorstep in the 21st century. The Archbishop of Canterbury summed things up for me when he said, "What is happening in Ukraine burns a hole in your soul." There are humanitarian efforts going on to make a difference. Some of those are happening now in our own district. I commend John Curry and his son Peter, as well as the Calligran Four Paws Hotel, who are collecting items and driving across to deliver them. Each and every one can play our part, including donating to the Disasters Emergency Committee. As a council, we are flying the Ukrainian flag here at Mill Lane to demonstrate our solidarity with the people of Ukraine. Officers have contacted fund managers to determine any links to Russian and Belarusian assets in our portfolios. To date, no direct exposure to Russian or Belarusian assets has been identified. We will ensure continual review of this. For all the families of Ukrainian children I have taught in North East Derbyshire, those Ukrainian colleagues I have had the privilege of working with, and for all those impacted in any way, my message is simple. Slav Ukrainia. Partnership in Europe has taken on renewed significance. On the 17th of February, senior officers and myself participated in a virtual meeting with the Landrat and staff from Darmstadt-Dieburg to discuss climate change. This is the beginning of a reimagined way of promoting close ties between our communities. Several approaches to promoting greener thinking were shared, along with encouragement for all we are doing to tackle the climate emergency. The day following the meeting was a race night in aid of my appeal for Ashgate Hospice, and I'm grateful to Councillor Jane Barry for organising a great evening that raised £1,000. Thank you. We'll not describe your behaviour that night, Councillor Barker, but I am appreciative of those who supported the event, especially Councillor Hartshorn for his generosity. April has a few events you may wish to attend, including a spring fair at the Technique Stadium on the 30th of April, St George's Day concert at Chatsworth on the 23rd, and a Peaky Blinders night at the Casa Hotel on the 16th of April. Featured are vehicles used in the filming of the television series and dancing to Cal's Cats. It's going to be a special evening. In April, Councillor Shipman has kindly agreed to have his hair shaved by me following full council. Please sponsor Councillor Shipman, but be reassured I won't be combining Peaky Blinders with my shaving technique on that occasion. Thank you all for your ongoing support. Item 5, leaders' announcements, please.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, just to echo and associate myself with the very powerful words you made around Ukraine. As a council, we've already been very clear with our partner councils and with the government that we wish to help in any way we can. And obviously, as details emerge, we will discuss that and bring that to the attention of all members. But absolutely echo what you say around encouraging residents to continue to do the amazing things that they are all doing by supporting the people of Ukraine. In terms of COVID, obviously, I think most of us will welcome the complete removal of the restrictions, although we do continue to advise residents to remain cautious and be sensible and do all the things that most of us have now gotten used to, like hand washing and masks in enclosed spaces and those sorts of things. We are still making good progress with our agile working changes, and the key priority at the moment is around ensuring that our premises, namely this building, is fit for purpose in terms of meeting the demands of the new ways of working. So there is a lot of work and progress being made on that. In terms of Cabinet, I think you'll see in the pack of information there's been some slight changes to portfolios. Councillor Kenyon will now cover economic development in addition to climate and transformation. Councillor Rennick will now cover housing and community safety, and Councillor Powell will cover leisure in addition to communities and communications. And I'd just like to thank them all for all the work they have done in their previous portfolios, and obviously look forward to working with them in their newer roles. You'll hopefully have seen the news around county deals, in that Derbyshire and Derby have been shortlisted for a county deal which could bring new powers and funding to the area. It's still very early days, and I would stress that. There is a lot to be worked up with government in terms of the exact shape of the deal. The government have been very clear that these deals are between the government and the upper tier authorities, although Derbyshire County Council have been very clear that they do want the deal to work on a collaborative basis with the districts and boroughs very firmly at the table. There will be 2 Q&A briefing sessions for all members. This is all city, county, district and borough councillors to attend later this month. So we will advertise the details of those sessions, and hopefully, as many of you who are interested in finding out more about the county deal and the shape that it may take will be able to go along and find out more. A few quick items from recent cabinet meetings. Very pleased to announce that we received a £1.4 million public sector decarbonisation grant for Dronfield Leisure Centre, which will enable it to follow in Eckington's footsteps. We very recently reviewed the fly tipping enforcement, and having benchmarked with other neighbouring local authorities, we've taken the decision to increase our penalties to the maximum for fly tipping and littering, and this will hopefully help to ensure that local residents know that we're taking a zero tolerance stance on this scourge of an issue within our beautiful countryside. We're also deploying more technology and trialling the use of remote CCTV as well in known fly tipping hotspots. So we are doing a lot of work around that at the moment. I'd like to thank our homelessness team at the council for their fantastic work in helping to prevent 75 families from becoming homeless over the winter, following a grant from the government's Household Support Fund. And I can't help but highlight, despite some of the veiled criticism at the last meeting, the fact that we've approved our parking strategy, which where we're committing to £280,000 per year to dealing with some of the most challenging parking hotspots in the district and finding pragmatic solutions in a way that the council has not done before. So very pleased about that. And I think that covers it. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dale. So item 6, public participation. Well, no questions have been submitted under procedure rule number 8. So we move to item 7, which are outcomes of the review of the chair of licensing allowance by the independent remuneration panel. So I'm going to hand over to the monitoring officer.
Thank you, Chair. The report, as said, is in the supplementary pack. Further to previous reports to members on the establishment of the IRP, we have now been able to appoint 3 members as required by law. The panel has now met to consider whether the role of Chair of Licensing should receive an SRA, a special responsibility allowance related to that role as part of the members' allowances scheme. Currently, this Chair receives no SRA. The information considered by the panel is detailed in the report, and this includes that no other council in Derbyshire does not give an SRA to the Chair of Licensing. In simpler words, we're the only authority in Derbyshire that doesn't give an SRA for the Chairman of Licensing. Having considered the matter, the panel's recommendation is that an SRA should be paid, and it should be paid at the same rate as the Chair of Standards. If a Vice Chair were appointed, there should be an SRA at the same rate as the Vice Chair of Standards. The recommendations are on page 3 of the supplementary pack and are that you consider the recommendations of the IRP in relation to the role of Chair and Vice Chair of Licensing, agree a suitable remuneration for such positions if appropriate, and if you do agree an SRA, consider whether to backdate it in accordance with the legislation quoted in the recommendation. Just for members' information, there will be a full review of the members' allowances scheme, and that's commencing later this month. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any comments or questions for the monitoring officer? If not, then can we move to recommendations? So, Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, I strongly support the recommendations within the paper, and I do believe that we should backdate to the earliest possible date. I think it's worth highlighting that Councillor Liggett has fulfilled this role since May 2020. So it is disappointing that it can't be backdated to then, but actually, as I understand it, local government regulations require that it can only be to the beginning of the financial year. But as Mrs. Sternberg has said, no other council does this. I think it's a bit of a hark back to when a cabinet member used to fulfil this role, and obviously that's not how we're doing things at the moment. So I think it is right and proper that that the amount of work that goes into doing that role is rightly recompensed. So yeah, fully support the recommendations. Happy to move them, and I move that we do backdate to the beginning of the financial year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Cupid. Are there any comments or questions? It's not been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? 1, and that's carried. Thank you. Item 8, the North East Derbyshire District Council Annual Pay Policy Statement. So hand over to Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Chair. This is a report that we bring every year as a procedural matter. We're required to report on this. It's for awareness and consideration, really. The pay policy statement sets out our policy on pay for senior managers and all employees. The report and statement reflects the current position based on the decisions we've made previously at full council, and we have an obligation under the Local Government Transparency Code to publish the information relating to pay and structures, including functional responsibilities, budget and staff resources annually on our website. And obviously the statement itself is included in the appendix. I don't think there's much more to say really than that, so I'm happy to move the recommendations that we accepted.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Cupid. Any comments or questions? Okay, we'll move to the vote then. All those in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? And that is carried. Thank you. Item 9, level of council tax for 2022-23. Councillor Parkin is absent through illness, so I'm going to hand over to Councillor Dale.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Again, this is a fairly procedural paper. The Localism Act 2011 requires us as the billing authority to calculate the council tax requirement each year. And each preceptor obviously approves their demand when setting their annual budget, as we did on the 31st of January. And since then, obviously, all the parish councils, the county, the fire authority, the police commissioner, etc., have all made their decisions. So we obviously have to take all of those other precepting authorities into account. The table on paragraph 2.5 sets out the levels of council tax for the year, accumulating all of the preceptors' demands. And I don't think there's much more to say other than to move the recommendation.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Cupid, thank you. Any comments or questions? Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear that? I know this is procedural, and I know that because we're the collection authority, we have to agree these figures in front of us. But I just feel I ought to make a point that really all these other authorities are putting up precepts quite significantly, including ourselves. And it should be noted that quite a few councillors in this room are party to those decisions. So, and it don't seem that long ago that the same councillors were in a photo, I remember, holding up a big plaque saying they weren't going to put council tax up. And I'm just saying that I might remind you of that in about 12 months' time. Cheers.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Shipman.
Thank you, Chair. We obviously need to keep putting council tax up slightly because we're getting cuts from central government. I think that's what this boils down to. This council is underfunded. It's financially, if you look at the, is it on? Is it on? All right. Sorry. And yeah, we had a report last month or the month before coming to full council where, the finances are fine this year. But if you look into the future, it's not looking fine. And I think that needs to be made clear that we're having to put it up because we've been made to put it up. But I think the leadership of this council need to be lobbying government for more money because we simply can't go on as we are doing. And I think that needs to be addressed sooner rather than later before this council is on its knees.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Dale to reply.
Thanks, Chair. I think the photo that Councillor Barker was referring to, I think dates back to 2013, but I think it's different times. Obviously, I'm a Conservative. If I could freeze council tax, I would do it every year, but blatantly, obviously, at the moment, we can't. Inflation, the rate it is at the moment, I think it's necessary to make increases, but not all the other authorities have increased by the maximum. Obviously, DCC could have increased by 5% and chose to increase by 3%. We've taken the decision to increase by 2.58%. I still think it's modest on the basis of the inflation that we're susceptible to as well as an organisation. I think Councillor Shipman's point, times are hard and we are having to make decisions to stay viable as an organisation. But I don't think actually the budget position is as bad as you're suggesting. I feel quite comfortable that we will transform as an organisation, and we need to. No organisation can stand still. We need to transform, and I think that we will do it. I don't think necessarily that throwing more money at the situation is always the answer. And we have actually avoided making any major cuts to any frontline services or any major redundancies. And I don't think that's necessarily on the cards in the future either. So we are doing well. And I think the budget situation is actually not as bad as you're making out.
Thank you. Well, according to procedures, this is requiring a recorded vote. So I'm going to hand over to the monitoring officer, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll read each of your names and ask you to say whether you're voting for, against, or abstaining. And as we have been doing in recent past, I will start at the end of the alphabet. Councillor P. Wright.
For.
Councillor B. Wright.
Against.
Councillor Winley.
Abstain.
Councillor Wheelhouse. Councillor Welton.
For.
Councillor Thacker.
4.
Councillor Tate,
4.
Councillor Stone, Councillor Strafford Stevenson,
4.
Councillor Shipman,
4.
Councillor Rough,
4.
Councillor Rouse,
4.
Councillor Rowe,
4.
Councillor Ridgway,
4.
Councillor Powell, Councillor Potts,
4.
Councillor Platts,
4.
Councillor Pickering,
4.
Councillor Morley, Councillor Lilly,
4.
Councillor Liggett,
4.
Councillor Lacey, Councillor Kerry, Councillor Kenyon,
4.
Councillor Jones,
4.
Councillor Hutchinson, Councillor Holmes, Councillor Hancock,
4.
Councillor Hall,
4.
Councillor Gomez Rini, Councillor Fennell, Councillor Emmons, Councillor Elliott, Councillor Dale,
4.
Councillor Cupid,
4.
Councillor Cornwall,
4.
Councillor Cooper, Councillor Clough,
4.
Councillor Birkin, Councillor Barry,
4.
Councillor Barker,
4.
Councillor Armitage,
4.
Councillor Ancliffe.
The results are 39 for, 2 against and 1 abstention. So that's carried. Thank you. So item 10, to answer any questions from members asked under Procedure Rule 9.2. The first one is a question from Councillor Fennell to the leader. Over to you, Councillor Fennell.
Okay, before I ask the question, can I just endorse the comments and statements that's been made about Ukraine, and a big thank you to the residents across North East Derbyshire who are all doing their little bit to try and help the situation. So the question I have for the leader is, can the leader confirm that all Section 106 contributions generated following new builds will be used 100% for the benefit of the community which is being affected by the new builds in their area?
Councillor Dale to reply.
Thank you, Councillor Fennell, for the question. The starting point for any Section 106 agreement is that it must be necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms, directly related to the development, and fairly and reasonably related in scale and kind to the development. As a result, any community infrastructure proposal to be funded by Section 106 money is very likely to be within or very close to the settlement in which the development is located. This somewhat depends, though, on how the Section 106 agreement is worded and how specific it is in terms of its scope. Each agreement will either state a specific project that the money goes towards, for example, a new classroom at St. Peter's Primary School, or the refurbishment of the multi-use games area at Central Park, for example, or the general purpose of the money, i.e. improved education facilities within the catchment area of X application site, or improved access or equipment to or enlargement of public open space within X kilometres of the application site. But even when that wording is less specific, it's worth remembering that Section 106 is often required to make a development sustainable, and it's in the best interest of the developer as well that the monies are spent as locally as possible. It often makes their developments more saleable as well. So developers, of course, have the right to challenge Section 106 spending where they feel it's not within keeping with the written agreements. So the summary is Section 106 money can only be spent in accordance with what is specified in the agreement wording. And I hope that's a useful answer.
Councillor Fennell, do you have a supplementary question?
No, not at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. So we move to the next question, which is from Councillor Shipman to Councillor Parkin. You've got a slight problem, but if you want to ask your question, and then I'll allow Councillor Dale to respond in Councillor Parkin's absence with what would happen next. Councillor Shipman.
Thank you, Chair. At the last council meeting, members were told that social housing rents would increase by 4.1% in line, and I'm quoting there, with government guidance. However, upon further investigation, it was found to be a cap a maximum cap by the government, not a recommendation. Can Councillor Dale clarify this inconsistency, please?
Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Chair. I think we're going to provide a written reply in response to this. I don't think it's fair that I clarify remarks made by someone else. So if you'll forgive us, we'll send a written reply or Councillor Parkin will send one when he's back fit and back to work.
So that's what's going to happen, Councillor Shipman. So when you get a written response, you are entitled to ask a supplementary to that written response, and then a written response will come to that, and then we'll collect all of that and put those into the minutes. So there will be transparency about the response that you've had in the supplementary and any other further response to that as well.
So other councillors will be able to see
Oh, yes.
what the response is.
Yes. Okay, so we'll move to item 11 to consider any motions from members under procedure rule number 10. So we have a motion submitted by Councillor Shipman. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I hope everyone across this chamber would abhor racism in all its forms. We've obviously had a recent situation where a Dronfield town councillor.
Before we proceed, can we make
Yeah.
sure we don't get into individual circumstances? I don't think that's going to be relevant to a debate that we're having here at the district. So please don't mention any individual cases.
The names publicly aren't in the public, so we're okay talking about it. Actually,
We're not, and that case has already been dealt with. It's been adjudicated on, and it would be inappropriate to discuss it or even raise it here.
This is where there is a problem, because it's not been dealt with. It's been looked at, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's been dealt with. But I think the point needs making that there's recent situations where the code of conduct's not been able to be applied because said councillors allegedly are doing this in their private life. Whereas the way I look at it is that we all have a duty, when we're elected, we all have a duty to represent our areas. Now, it doesn't matter if I were to make racist comments at the pub, no one's going to be able to know the difference between Ross as a councillor or Ross saying it as an individual in his private life. And I think that we need to actually get this clarified, because the code of conduct does need to apply to all of us, whatever we are doing, if we are saying stuff in a public forum. And that's the key here. If we're saying stuff in a public forum, then the code of conduct should be able to investigate that situation and come up with a recommendation in response to that. And I think that what we've found recently is that that's not been able to happen. Through no fault of anyone in this council, that is just the system that we are having to operate within. And I'd hope that everyone in this council chamber would support this motion, because quite clearly we can't have a repeat of the situation we have had, where potential racist comments have not been able to be investigated by the monitoring officer of this council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second. I'll reserve my right to speak until later, please.
Thank you. So, any comments on the motion that's been put forward? Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Chair. Clearly, our group fully supports the first bit of the motion around racism, but actually we feel it should be amended to cover all forms of discrimination. I think if we left it as it were, I think our residents would feel that it fell short, in terms of the wider discrimination that people face. So we are going to propose a slight amendment, and I'll cover that in a moment. I think with regard to the scope of the code of conduct, I think it's fair to say that our group on the whole takes a bit more of a balanced approach. We do recognise that high standards, we recognise the high standards that our residents expect of us as councillors, but we also should be entitled to a private life. And I'm not suggesting that that's in any way related to the case that you're suggesting, but in other forms, in other ways, we all have a private life, and we have to just carefully strike that balance between allowing us all to have a private life and also suitably applying the code of conduct, in the ways that our residents would expect. So I think if we were to I think if we were to take that to its natural course, we'd like to propose some amendments to the motion. So I'll read out a slightly amended version of the motion, if that's okay, Chair. The council abhors discrimination in all its forms and in all circumstances. Council accepts that the public do not always understand that the code of conduct does not apply to the behaviour of a councillor in their private life. Council believes that members are entitled to a private life and therefore accepts that the code of conduct only applies to members while they are conducting their role as councillors, but council agrees that the chair of standards committee should write to the Secretary of State asking whether the applicability of the code of conduct should be extended to apply to a councillor's private life in addition to their role as a councillor in those cases where there is a direct impact on the reputation of this council. That's a proposed amendment, Chair.
Do we have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Cupid. Thank you. You resume your right to. Thank you. Right. So we're on the amendment. Do you accept the amendment as it?
Yes,
is?
yes, Chair. I mean, it's basically what it already says. I would have thought, isn't it?
So the amendment is accepted. So we can take this as the substantive motion. So let us debate the substantive motion, which is the one that's just been amended. Councillor Barker.
You put me on spot there, Alex. I wasn't expecting that. Can I have a minute to read it? Now, if they accept it, I think, I mean, my speech was obviously about that, you know, that we accept the sentiments in the motion. And I know it's a tricky one, and you've put a sentence in there about having a private life. But I think we all accept that wherever we are, people know us as councillors, and that can all then reflect badly on the council, whichever one it is that you sit on. So it is a very thin line between private and when you're a councillor and when you're not. And unfortunately, and it is as you'll verify from Friday night. That there's sometimes it is a grey area, but I think if the Lib Dems accept that amendment, our group is as well.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Lilly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whatever colour your politics are or whatever else. We have all got a law to face, and there are laws of this land that discover discrimination, that cover racism, and each and every individual, whether it be a councillor or whether it be a private person, should be held accountable to that, to the full strength of the law. I will support this, and I hope everybody else will do the same with the same sentiments.
Thank you. Councillor Barry.
Yes, Chair. For me, the discrimination, you know, like Jeff's just said, that there's a law of the land that goes with that. My concerns are, I feel that this is, I'm happy to accept this, but I feel as if when we have staff that break the code of conduct, they're disciplined and actions taken against them, whether it's in their personal life or not. What's the difference between that and a councillor? You know, they would bring somebody into disrepute and we would do something about that. So there's no difference between a member of staff doing this and a councillor doing it. And you've not acted strongly enough as far as I'm concerned in it. I will back this if the Lib Dems do, but you need to do something about what you've not done and sort it out sooner rather than later.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Pickering.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite an important motion, and I think the amendment that's been put forward to extend it to all forms of oppression is extremely useful rather than single something out. I would just hope that the private life part of it isn't some kind of loophole that can be used in the future. And what we should be thinking about, if people say something in their own home behind closed doors that's out of earshot of the general public, that might be private life. If somebody's not acting as a councillor but does something in public, and we know that things have been put on Twitter and other social media that actually might be private comments, but they're out in the public domain. That's what we should be concentrating on. I'm not too bothered about what people do behind their own closed doors. That's private. It's what's accessible to the public. And we should make that clear, because otherwise, I understand what Councillor Dale is trying to say, but it's a bit weak unless we tighten that up a bit.
Councillor Ridgway.
Yes, I totally agree with what Councillor Pickering said. I mean, yes, we're entitled to a private life. That's behind closed doors and out of the public domain. But Facebook and Twitter, whether you're in your home or whatever in the car, is not your private life. That is giving it out to the public. So I think if we are going to go with this, we need to make sure that it does state that as a councillor, you do not voice your discriminatory ideas or philosophy on anything that is in the public domain, such as Facebook and things like that.
I'm going to come back to, I know you accepted the amendment, so yours was then became the secondary part of it. But if you want to, I'm going to come back to you, Councillor Hancock, for a comment if you wish to, and then I'm going to come back to you, Councillor Shipp.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to everyone who's spoken. I mean, Councillor Pickering sums up perfectly the intent behind the motion. I mean, obviously, in this room, we've got very different political views, but I think we all sing from the same hymn sheet when we all oppose discrimination in all of its forms. None of it is ever acceptable. And one of the big problems that we have is one bad apple casts things on all of us. And one person's behaviour of this nature reflects badly on all of us, no matter how well intentions and how our own personal motives. It's good to hear so many positive comments towards it. And hopefully this is going to pass unanimously. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Shipman?
Yeah, I think it's been summarised well by everyone that's spoken, actually, that there's a difference between private life behind closed doors and what you go up to in your private life, but posting stuff on, let's say, Twitter in an open forum, when you can actually restrict your posts as well, that to me is in a public forum, and therefore, as far as I'm concerned, you're acting as a councillor because you're making your comments known to the general public. And I'd like to think that this councillor would be condemned locally by other people in this room. And actually,
strain again, Councillor Ship.
Well, I mean, to be fair though, if someone in my group was doing behaviour like that, they would be slung out this group, my group.
But can we just stick to the district?
And well, we can talk about it in the district format. If myself, David, or Pam was to come out with comments that I've seen personally on Twitter, they would be slung out my group, and I'd expect every other group in this room would act in a similar manner, whether that's at parish, district, county, or in any other form where we are all grouped up. And I'd like to see actual action from individuals rather than this be just, we write to the Secretary of State and that's the last we hear of it.
Thank you. And Councillor Dale to reply.
Just in response to Councillor Pickering and Councillor Ridgway's points, I think that's exactly the point I think we're trying to make with the final, in addition to their role as a council, where there is a direct impact on the reputation of council. That's what we really mean by that private life thing, and that's the balance we're trying to strike. So I think we do absolutely agree with what he's saying, and that's the intention. That's it.
Thank you. So we come to the motion as amended. So all those in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? So that's unanimous. That's good news. Thank you. So item 12, I move that the public be excluded from the meeting during the discussion of the following item of business to avoid the disclosure to them of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 1 and 3, part 1 of Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972, as amended by the Local Government Access to Information Variation Order 2006. Have a seconder?
I second.
Thank you, Councillor Rough. All those in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? That's carried. We now move into excluded part, so we need to stop the live feed. Item 15, as an urgent business, we have the report linked to chairing one of the scrutiny committees. So I'm going to hand over to Councillor Dale, please.
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, Councillor Hutchinson, due to work commitments, has had to stand down from his role as Chair of Growth Scrutiny, and I'd like to thank him for all of his time and effort, in previous years into that role. I'd like to propose that we nominate Councillor Strafford Stevenson to replace him, obviously for the remainder of the civic year. I think that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Cupid. Any other nominations? No comment. If it had been for the Price is Right, I would have. You'll want to know what he did at race night soon, I can tell you. All those then in favour of Councillor Strafford Stevenson? Anyone against? Any abstentions? That's it. Congratulations, Councillor Strafford Stevenson. You are elected. Thank you. There is no other urgent business from myself. So can I thank you all for your attendance and declare the meeting closed?